In the vast history of Middle-earth, few moments carry more weight than the transformation of Gandalf the Grey into Gandalf the White. While many know of this change, its true significance runs deeper than most realize, touching the very foundations of Tolkien's universe. To understand this metamorphosis, we must first grasp who Gandalf truly was and why his presence in Middle-earth carried such profound importance. Before the world was shaped, before the first star kindled in the heavens, there existed the Ainur, divine beings who sang the universe into existence under the guidance of Eru Ilúvatar, the One. Among these celestial spirits were the Maya, lesser spirits who served the greater Valar in crafting and preserving creation. One of these Maya, known then as Olórin, served in the halls of Nienna in those ancient days, where he learned patience and wisdom in the face of suffering. As ages passed and the world took form, the Valar established their realm in Valinor, a land of timeless beauty beyond the western seas. There, in the gardens of Ermo, Olórin moved like morning mist among the elves who had answered the call to dwell in the blessed realm. His presence, gentle and unseen, touched their dreams, gifting them visions of courage and hope. A warrior finding strength to face another dawn, a mother protecting her children through the darkest night, a craftsman persevering to create beauty in times of sorrow. Yet the peaceful days didn't last forever for Middle-earth. In the Third Age, as Sauron's shadow crept across Middle-earth once more, the Valar gathered in council and selected 5 Maya to journey across the sea. Each would take form as a wizard, tasked with guiding the free peoples against the growing darkness. When the choice fell to Olórin, he expressed reluctance, claiming weakness and admitting his fear of Sauron. Manwë, greatest of the Valar, saw in this humility exactly what Middle-earth would need, and made his choice without doubt. The Istari arrived at the Grey Havens in the year 1000. They took the form of elderly men, a deliberate restriction, not mere disguise, that bound their divine power. Among them, Olórin descended to Middle-earth's shores clad in grey robes. For the Valar had learned harsh lessons from their previous direct interventions. Their battle against Morgoth in the War of Wrath had shattered the western lands of Beleriand, drowning entire kingdoms beneath the waves and forever changing the shape of Middle-earth. Mountains had crumbled, valleys had been carved, and countless lives had been lost in that devastating display of divine power. This time, the Valar bound their emissaries with strict limitations. None of the Istari could wield their full power, nor directly challenge Sauron's might with force. In the years following their arrival, the 5 Istari began to forge their separate ways across Middle-earth. Saruman the White eventually claimed the Tower of Isengard as his seat of power, surrounding himself with ancient texts and artifacts. Radagast the Brown retreated to the forests, finding his purpose among the beasts and birds. The 2 blue wizards, LOTR and Pallando, journeyed far into the east, disappearing beyond the knowledge of their brethren. But Olórin chose a different path, one that would keep him ever in motion among all the peoples of the West. Unlike the others, he claimed no fixed dwelling and gathered neither wealth nor followers. He carried only his staff, his sword, and the clothes on his back as he traversed the vast expanse of Middle-earth. From the rolling hills of the Shire, where hobbits tended their gardens, to the marble halls of Gondor, where ancient kings had ruled, his grey-clad figure became a familiar sight on the roads of the world. His paths wove through every realm of the free peoples. In the taverns of Bree, he would share tales with travelers while observing the movements of suspicious strangers. Among the elves of Rivendell, he spent long hours in council with Lord Elrond, studying ancient lore and sharing news of the world beyond. In the golden wood of Lothlorien, he walked beneath Malorn trees with the Lady Galadriel, their discussions touching matters too deep for mortal understanding. While his fellow wizards settled into fixed roles and places, Gandalf alone among the wise took interest in the lore of hobbits, those small folk deemed insignificant by the great powers of the age. His influence extended from the courts of kings to the common taverns of the world. This approach, seemingly scattered, wove a complex web of alliances. Among the dwarves of the Blue Mountains, he listened intently to tales of lost glory and dreams of reclaiming ancient homes, understanding that even fallen kingdoms could rise again. Among the great eagles of the Misty Mountains, he established bonds of trust that would save both himself and others in dire moments. His paths frequently led him to the House of Elrond and other centers of wisdom, yet he never remained too long in any one place. Where others saw the world's peoples as pieces on a game board, he saw them as they truly were, the living heart of Middle-earth that the Valar had sent him to preserve. These early choices laid the groundwork for what was to come. But beyond that, Gandalf would face a test that would shake the foundations of his very being, a confrontation that would transform him into something Middle-earth had never seen before. In the depths of Moria, beneath countless tons of mountain stone, destiny waited. In January of 3019, the Fellowship of the Ring journeyed through the ancient Dwarven kingdom, seeking a hidden path to the eastern lands. They had no choice but to brave these dark halls. Sauron's spies watched the mountain passes above, while cruel winter storms had defeated their attempt to cross Caradhras. The 9 companions needed to pass through Moria's vast darkness unseen, carrying with them the One Ring on its vital journey toward destruction in Mordor. The Balrog that lurked in Moria's depths was like Gandalf himself, a fellow Maya, a divine spirit from the dawn of creation. Gandalf alone among his companions understood the true nature of what awaited them. He had once wielded the full might of a Maya in Valinor, before accepting the bonds that came with his mission. Where he had chosen to bind his power in service of Middle-earth's peoples, the Balrog, though somewhat diminished after its master's defeat in the War of Wrath, remained a terrible force of shadow and flame. Even weakened, it retained much of its ancient might, a being that had fallen into darkness ages ago and never relinquished its destructive nature. Their coming battle would be no mere clash of sword and spell, but a confrontation between 2 ancient powers, one bound in service, one corrupted in shadow, that had both sung in the first music of creation. Now these ancient powers met on the narrow span of Khazad-dûm's bridge, with the Fellowship's fate hanging in the balance. Shadows deepened as the Balrog approached, its form twice the height of a tall man, darkness flowing around it like water, while flames erupted from within. Gandalf's voice thundered across the bridge as he commanded the demon to return to the shadows. The Balrog met his challenge with silence. From its darkness erupted a blade of red flame, and its great whip cracked against the stone. Glamdring rang out as it parried the Balrog's fiery blade. The bridge trembled beneath them as they clashed, fire and shadow billowing around the demon, while Gandalf's staff flared with white light, holding back the darkness. Strike after strike, neither gained advantage on the narrow span. Then Gandalf struck the bridge itself with his staff, channeling his power into the ancient stone. Cracks spread through the stonework. The section beneath the Balrog's feet gave way, sending the demon plummeting into the abyss. But as it fell, its whip of flame lashed out, wrapping around Gandalf's knees and dragging him into the darkness. The Fellowship could only watch in horror as both figures vanished into the lightless depths. The battle that followed would last far longer than the brief clash witnessed by the Fellowship. Their fall into the abyss beneath Moria was just the beginning. Through lightless caves and ancient tunnels they fought, far below the deepest delving of the dwarves. In these primordial depths dwelt things older than Sauron himself, nameless creatures that gnawed at the roots of the world. Yet neither Gandalf nor his foe paused in their combat. Each day of battle stripped away another layer of Gandalf's Istari bonds. His staff's light grew stronger, his spells more potent, as more of his Maya nature emerged. Through water and fire they wrestled, the Balrog's flames melting ancient stone, while Gandalf's growing power shook the mountain's foundations. Their combat carried them up the endless stair, where each step seemed to unlock more of his ancient might. By the time they emerged atop Ziraxigil, Gandalf wielded power he had not touched since leaving Valinor, though still bound to his mortal form. Wind and lightning answered his call as they fought for 2 days and nights, their clash visible for leagues around as a storm of fire and lightning crowned the mountain. Yet the Balrog's might remained undiminished, its evil unbound by any restrictions. On the 3rd day, Gandalf understood what had to be done. The Balrog could not be allowed to return to Middle-earth. Its power would devastate the free peoples he had sworn to protect. In one final effort, he gathered all his strength and struck. The mountaintop itself trembled as his power broke the Balrog. But the cost was terrible. The strain of wielding such power shattered Gandalf's mortal form. As his enemy's flame extinguished on the frozen rocks below, Gandalf collapsed upon the peak, his spirit breaking free from the circles of the world. Then something unprecedented occurred. Beyond the sight of Valar and elves, beyond the circles of the world where Gandalf's spirit had ventured, Eru Ilúvatar, the supreme creator, who had remained distant since the shaping of Arda, stirred once more. Perhaps it was Gandalf's willing sacrifice that moved him, a divine being who chose death rather than risk unleashing destructive power upon Middle-earth. Or perhaps it was simply that the time had come for direct intervention. The ways of the Creator remain forever mysterious, even to the Valar. Naked I was sent back, for a brief time, until my task is done, and naked I lay upon the mountaintop. The tower behind was crumbled into dust, the window gone, the ruined stair was choked with burned and broken stone. I was alone, forgotten, without escape upon the hard horn of the world. There I lay, staring upward, while the stars wheeled over, and each day was as long as a life age of the earth. Faint to my ears came the gathered rumor of all lands, the springing and the dying, the song and the weeping, and the slow, everlasting groan of overburdened stone. And so, at the last Gwaihir, the Windlord found me again, and he took me up and bore me away. Later, Gwaihir the Windlord found him upon Ziraxigil's frozen peak. The great eagle bore his naked form through bitter winds to the golden woods of Lothlorien. When he finally awoke, he emerged transformed, the change running soul-deep. The Valar had sent him first as their emissary, but something greater seemed to have touched his being during his journey beyond the world's circles. His power had grown, yet remained carefully contained. His authority had deepened, as if rooted in the very foundations of creation. Though still bound by the core restrictions of the Istari, Gandalf the White now carried a new purpose. Where once he had worked through subtle guidance, now he could act with authority in times of greatest need. His staff no longer channeled mere fire and light, but could unleash power that would break ancient sorceries and overcome the strongest of dark magics. In Fangorn Forest, the first revelation of this change came through mistaken identity. When Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli encountered the white-robed figure among the trees, they believed they faced Saruman himself. The confusion proved telling. Where once Gandalf had worn grey as the lesser of the Order, he now appeared in the white robes that had marked Saruman's leadership. This was no mere change of clothing. In taking on the white, Gandalf had assumed Saruman's position as head of the Istari, marking a fundamental shift in the hierarchy established by the Valar themselves. "Gandalf," he said, "but you are all in white." "Yes, I am white now," said Gandalf. "Indeed, I am Saruman. One might almost say, Saruman as he should have been." His declaration in that moment, that he was now Gandalf the White, revealed the fundamental change in Middle-earth's order. Where Saruman had abandoned his purpose for power, corrupting his white robes with schemes of domination, Gandalf now embodied the true meaning of the White Wizard's role. The Valar had chosen Saruman to lead the Istari in their mission to unite and guide the free peoples against Sauron. Now Gandalf would fulfill that abandoned duty, his transformation marking him as the one who would complete what Saruman had failed to do. From Fangorn, Gandalf rode first to Edoras, where he freed King Theoden from Saruman's influence. Saruman had spent years carefully weaving webs of control over the king's mind, yet now Gandalf dispelled that influence within moments. In the aftermath of Theoden's liberation, the truth of Saruman's betrayal emerged in full. The head of the White Council had abandoned wisdom for power, breeding armies of Uruk-hai in the pits of Isengard, and ought to dominate Middle-earth himself. The armies of Rohan and the Huorns of Fangorn had crushed Saruman's forces at Helm's Deep, breaking the military might of Isengard. Thousands of Uruk-hai, bred in the pits beneath Orthanc, lay dead on the battlefield. The victory marked the end of Saruman's dreams of conquest, but the former head of the White Council remained a threat while his power endured. Gandalf led a company to Isengard, Theoden king, Eomer of Rohan, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli among them. They found the ring of Isengard flooded and broken, its gates torn down, its pits and caverns drowned. The Ents' vengeance had been thorough, but the Tower of Orthanc remained untouched, its black stone impervious even to the Ents' strength. There Saruman waited, trapped but not powerless. Even in defeat, Saruman wielded his most dangerous weapon. His voice had once swayed the White Council itself, had convinced the wise to delay their attack on Dol Guldur, had kept them blind to his own betrayal for centuries. When he spoke, that voice still carried its ancient power, sweet and persuasive, promising wisdom and alliance to any who would listen. Yet when his honeyed words reached Gandalf, they found no purchase. The transformed White Rider stood unmoved by manipulation that had once entranced the greatest minds in Middle-earth. With a single command, Gandalf severed his former superior's connection to the Order's power. The staff shattered in Saruman's hands, the pieces falling. The act marked the final confirmation of Gandalf's new status. He now wielded authority to strip the Order's former head of his power and position. "Behold, I am not Gandalf the Grey, whom you betrayed. I am Gandalf the White, who has returned from death. You have no color now, and I cast you from the Order and from the Council." He raised his hand and spoke slowly in a clear, cold voice. "Saruman, your staff is broken." There was a crack, and the staff split asunder in Saruman's hand, and the head of it fell down at Gandalf's feet. After Saruman's fall, he rode to Minas Tirith with Pippin, racing against the Nine who now served a darker master than he had once been. In the White City, he became both commander and counsellor, directing its defences while giving hope to its people as shadow crept ever closer to their walls. Throughout the siege that followed, Gandalf moved tirelessly between the city's levels, strengthening defences where they weakened, rallying soldiers where they faltered, and lending his wisdom to Denethor's son, Faramir, when the steward's mind turned to madness. When the armies of the West later marched on the Black Gate itself, Gandalf stood among their leaders. He remained as he had always been, a guide who kindles hope in others, pointing the way forward, but never walking the final steps for them. Some whispered that Gandalf's willing sacrifice had moved Eru Ilúvatar to grant him return, for here was a being whose heart remained purely set on protecting rather than dominating creation. While others pointed to how even the Maya could fall to corruption, making the Valar hesitant to further intervene in Middle-earth's affairs, the Creator's infinite wisdom had seen something in Gandalf that even the Valar could not perceive. Perhaps, as some would later say, this had been his destined path all along. One truth remained clear. From the beginning, Gandalf had understood and embraced his purpose. Through every trial and transformation, his devotion to Arda and its people, the precious creation of Eru Ilúvatar, had never wavered. When the Fourth Age dawned and the time of magic began to pass, the tales of Gandalf's journey from grey to white spread through every corner of Middle-earth. In the great halls of Minas Tirith, minstrels sang of his stand against the Witch King, his staff a beacon in the darkness. In the golden wood of Lothlorien, elves spoke of the Maya who had fallen beyond the circles of the world, only to return with power anew. And in the humble taverns of the Shire, hobbits raised toasts to the conjurer of fireworks who had become a legend. From mortal courts to elven glades, from dwarven hearths to the beds of children begging one more story before sleep, the tale of Gandalf the White grew in the telling. Some spoke of sacrifice, of how he had surrendered himself to defeat the Balrog. Others mused on destiny, wondering if the Creator's own hand had shaped his path. But all agreed on one truth, that Gandalf had forever changed the fate of Middle-earth.